Good afternoon. My name is Eva Malona. I'm the President and CEO of Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome each and every one of you today to our four-part full speaker series, The Uncertainty of Daca. It's wonderful to see so many friends here. For those who are new, MIRA is the largest immigrant advocacy organization in New England that has been in the front lines for 33 years supporting and promoting immigrant rights and immigrant inclusion. In the past few years, immigrant and refugee groups have suffered significantly, but we are now entering a new era of hope. Since Daca was introduced in 2012, hundreds and thousands of young immigrants across the country were provided with an opportunity to work here, to study, to serve in the military. Daca has proved to be one of the most incredible integration programs in our country. The election of President Biden opens up a chapter of opportunity. The president-elect, as a figure who worked across the aisle, will provide the leadership necessary to get Daca to the finish line. Today, we will discuss the past, the present, and the future of Daca. We are joined by my colleagues, Sarang Sakavat and Jessica Chico, both federal policy experts, as well as Adriana, a friend of MIRA who has been a Daca recipient for 4 years. We encourage you all to participate by posing questions in the chat box, we will address at the end, to stay involved, to work with us. We have a lot of work to do to get Daca through the finish line. Thank you again for joining today. Thank you so much for the support that
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Eva, for the introductions. My name is Sarang Sekavat. I am the former federal policy director at MIRA, and am still can't stay away from the organization, so I'm back again. As Eva said, we want to talk about the past, present, and future of Daca. And I'm going to be handling the past piece, and Jessica will talk about the present and the future. And then we'll also hear from Adriana, as Eva mentioned earlier. So Daca, to put Daca in context, it really came out of, it developed out of what's called the DREAM Act, the Development Relief Education for Alien Minors. This was a bipartisan piece of legislation that was originally introduced in 2001 to provide relief to people who were brought here as youth, who have educational opportunities or wish to serve in the military, along those lines. And what, DREAM Act had been pushed over and over and over again for many years, have been reintroduced repeatedly over the years. In 2010, we actually got really close to passage of Daca. December of 2010, lame duck session of Congress. This was, of course, after the big Tea Party wave. We actually did get Daca passed in the House of Representatives, or excuse me, the DREAM Act passed in the House of Representatives. And unfortunately, it was then filibustered in the Senate. And basically what DREAM Act was, DACA really just kind of mirrors the DREAM Act in terms of eligibility. So when DACA was introduced in June of 2012, 2 years after that failure of the DREAM Act to pass, like I mentioned, it really was introduced just kind of as a bandage, a way to provide temporary relief to folks because the administration believed we would eventually see a DREAM Act passed. And so, like I said, DACA really mirrored the DREAM Act. It was, so folks had to be eligible. You had to enter the country before you turned 16. You had to enter the country 5 years before DACA was announced. So it was announced on June 15th of 2012. So you had to have entered prior to June 15th of 2007. You had to have been in school or have graduated from high school in order to be eligible. You had to be under the age of 31 when the program was announced. So again, that would have been June 15th. So it would have been June 15th, 1981. You had to be born after that. And there were a number of criminal bars. So for instance, no felony convictions, no more than 3 misdemeanor convictions, no convictions for something called significant misdemeanors. This was something that the administration really created for the DACA program. And what DACA really provided for folks was 2 years of work authorization, 2 years of protection from deportation. And then once you have those things, and particularly once you have the work authorization, you can now get a Social Security card. With Social Security, you can now, at least in Massachusetts and in most states, you could get a driver's license. In Massachusetts, DACA recipients were eligible for in-state tuition rates, for example. So there were a lot of very concrete, very significant benefits for DACA recipients. And like I said, even though it's a 2-year program, but even though it's only 2 years, it was renewable, and you could renew it at any time. Even if your DACA had been expired for a year, let's say, you were still eligible to renew it. So that wasn't a problem at all for folks. The administration a couple of years later actually tried to expand DACA as well. They introduced what was called DAPA, Deferred Action for Parents of Americans, and what we call the DACA Plus, kind of just an expansion to the DACA program. And so what these two did, the DAPA, the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans, very similar to the DACA program. It was continuous residence since January 1st of 2010. Physically present on the date it was announced in November of 2014, had to have a US citizen or green card holder child on the date of the announcement. So again, November of 2014. And there were a number of criminal bars to eligibility, the same criminal bars that you saw in DACA. They tried to expand DACA basically by moving up the entry date to the same January 1st of 2010 as they did with the DAPA. And they tried to eliminate the age requirements. Unfortunately, what we saw with these attempts to expand the program through these two, was that a number of states, 26 different states, led by Texas, sued to prevent the implementation of these programs. They got a very, let's say, a very friendly judge to their cause in the Texas court, in the federal court down in Texas, Judge Andrew Hannon, who folks might have heard, he was actually back in the news again recently with some election decisions. Unfortunately, his decision was affirmed by the Fifth Circuit, and that case then went to the Supreme Court in June of 2016. And unfortunately, what happened was this was after Justice Scalia had passed, so we had only 8 members of the court, wound up in a 4-4 tie, and that actually meant that the Fifth Circuit ruling stood. So that's where we were really at the end of the Obama administration. Effectively, was we had DACA, the DAPA and this attempt to expand DACA were blocked by the federal courts. And with that, I can now pass it over to Jessica Kiko.
Great. Thank you, Sarang. So I'm charged with sharing a little bit about what happened to the DACA program under the Trump administration, and then talking about where we can go from there. So Trump, fairly early on in his administration in September of 2017, announced that he was ending the program. And like many immigration-related actions that President Trump took, that decision was very quickly challenged in the courts, who put that end of the program on hold while the case made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. And it was just in June of this year that the Supreme Court issued a decision saying that the termination of the Daca program was unlawful and that the Daca program stood. The court did not go as far as saying that the administration couldn't end the program. It just said essentially that the way the Trump administration had tried to end the program was unlawful. And so very quickly after the Supreme Court's decision, we were very hopeful that the DACA program would be restored to what it had been under the Obama administration. One of the things that happened under the Trump administration is that individuals that were newly eligible for DACA that had not previously applied were not able to apply. But unfortunately, relatively quickly, immigration issued a memo limiting DACA once again, making it impossible for applicants that had never held DACA before to apply for the first time, and limiting the protection offered under DACA, the protection from deportation and the work permit, to just 1 year instead of the 2 years that had previously been available. Now, we know that President-elect Biden has pledged to restore the DACA program, and we hope that that will mean a full restoration to the way the program was under the Obama administration, and perhaps even more generous and broader than that. And we also hope to see the introduction of legislation that would provide a pathway to citizenship for DACA holders and beyond. The Dream and Promise Act, which was passed by the House now over a year ago, would have provided a pathway to permanent protection and citizenship for DACA holders and other young immigrants, as well as beneficiaries of temporary protected status, TPS. And so that's where we are now. Hopeful. I think DACA holders can breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that that President-elect Biden has pledged to restore the program, but that still does not provide permanent protection for all these young immigrants. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Adriana Placencia. She's a current DACA holder who connected with MIRA earlier this year when she renewed her DACA. Adriana, take it away.
Hi, my name is Adriana. I am currently 19 y yo soy Adriana Placencia y soy orgullosa de ser un DACA recipiente y honestamente DACA ha sido una bendición para mí y mi familia. Nos ha ayudado con trabajo, económicamente y estamos muy como felices de tener esta oportunidad en nuestras vidas. Basically what I just said is we're just so grateful to have DACA in our life. It has helped us in so many ways for me and my mom. Everything started from my mom, basically. She was in Peru. She had a career as a lawyer, and she gave that up just to give me a better life. She got robbed maybe 3 times in Peru. Her earrings snatched off from her like in daylight. She just wanted a better life for me. She didn't want me to grow up and be scared of going outside. So she took the decision and we moved to America, basically. And my mom has pushed education very far into my routine. She wanted me to get all the best grades, and thankfully I did. In high school, I was ranked top 50 and out of 300 students in my grade. So that was really a big accomplishment for me. I passed with honors, and I'm just so thankful for everything that has happened to me. I even got my driver's license this year after my second attempt, but very glad I got it because we don't have a car. My mom's a single mom. We can't afford that much stuff. So now I can at least, get on a zip car and maybe go to the beach with my mom before everything turns to snow. So we're just really glad of all the opportunities that it has given us. My boyfriend as well is a DACA recipient, and we go through all the struggles of trying to get our grades up and just trying to move forward in America. So yeah, it helps a lot, honestly. And because of we are aware of organizations like the MIRA Coalition, it just helps me push more forward to my goal, which I want to be a school guidance counselor or a school psychiatrist. And I just want to help people. I love talking. I could talk for maybe hours if I wanted to. And I love hearing other people's opinions and what their struggles and what they're going through. And I love being able to help others. So I'm really glad that I got to work with this organization, just because I never know where laws and everything is going to go on later in life. So I'm just glad I have someone to back me up, and I want to do the same thing for other people. I could say a lot more, but I'm not quite sure of my ideas at the moment. But yeah, I'm just really glad for how everything turned out. And I'm very glad that we still got to keep DACA because it is really important. Like I said, I'm in college. My mom's a single mom. We can't afford to pay everything that others can. So by having DACA and being allowed to do the in-state student tuition, it has pushed a lot since I also got a scholarship from the school as well as the John and Abigail Adams scholarship. It just works really well for us and we're able to keep a stable life. And I work as well at a hotel in Chelsea near where I'm living in. And my mom doesn't have papers, but technically I have a worker's permit. So I'm able to work and help, take care of my financial situation. So it's really nice to give back to my mom what she gave to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adriana. And I think it was absolutely our pleasure to be able to provide just a little bit of assistance. You are absolutely a star. So I think now we're able to take on questions. You can put questions in the chat and we can try and direct them to the right person. I do see a question about how many DACA individuals may be in Massachusetts. I think we may have mentioned that currently there's about, the last estimate was 5,480 current DACA recipients in the state, but there are estimates that many more would be eligible to apply if they had the opportunity to apply now, up to 17,000 more. So there are potentially, thousands more individuals that could benefit from a reopening and reestablishment of the DACA program. There's a question from GBH to Adriana. Adriana, can you talk about what would happen if you lost DACA, what that would mean for you and your family?
It would mean, honestly, we have talked about since Trump came into administration previously, and my mom just gave me a heads up, hey, this might happen, and we just got to be prepared for, the worst. And I honestly just can't imagine my life without DACA. It has provided everything to me, my job, my education, my economic stability. So I'm not quite sure. We do have family here that we do have a lot of support from them. So I would just hope they would give me like the strength I need to like keep going and find whatever I can do to keep everything stable.
Thank you. And again, feel free to put questions in the chat. There's a question for you, Sarang. What has Biden said he would do about DACA?
So our understanding so far is basically, I think like Jessica was saying, that we would, that a Biden administration would bring DACA back as it was before 2017, possibly expanding it. And I know there's going to be a huge push now with this new administration in to pass the Dream and Promise Act that Jessica was talking about as well. Dream and Promise would not just be for Dreamers, it also for TPS recipients.
Thank you, Sarang. Are there other questions in the chat? Adriana, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about when you made the decision to apply for DACA and what was going through your mind then?
So I was only 14. I just started to, venture out into like friendships and everything like that. And my mom is very on top of everything. She looks up all the laws, she looks up at everything. So she just basically explained to me what's going on and what I need to do to apply for DACA and how I need to, be further on, like in education wise, just to always get my grades up, never try not to get in trouble, and don't associate with anything that could possibly jeopardize this opportunity for us. So that's what we did. And once I turned 15, we had this big party for my quinceañera. And the very next day, she had all the paperwork already filed and written and everything. And we just sent them off. And I think she was more excited about sending the paperwork in than having my own party. But it was a really nice moment because after the party, we were just like, oh, we did it. Everybody's happy. My family's all around us, and we were just sending in the papers in. So it was very special, honestly. And I tried to keep the same attitude every time I sent in my paperwork, just because we're very grateful every time.
Thank you. And there's actually a follow-up question for you, which is whether having DACA made it easier for you to be eligible for any financial aid.
Yes. So because I got a scholarship in high school about my John and Abigail Adams, I looked it up right when I got it, if I'm eligible to do it, even if I'm not technically a citizen or a resident here. And I asked on Google, because you can find anything on there, saying, if I have DACA, will I be able to get the John and Abigail Adams scholarship? They said yes, as long as I have to just go on another website, fill out some papers, do some of my taxes and everything like that. So we were able to do that, and I got the scholarship, which is helpful. Any kind of economic help is always useful and always thankful for. And then for the in-state tuition as well, that helped economically, just lower it, because out of state and of like international students pay a lot more for college and education as other students do. As well as I got a scholarship from UMass Boston, which is where I attend, and they gave me a scholarship too. So having DACA really helped economically, because my mom's a single mom, and right now I'm paying half the rent basically. So we're just trying to keep stable. We're using everything we can, and DACA really did help without all that.
Great. It sounds like you were really able to benefit from some merit-based scholarship. There's a question for you, Sarang, about whether you can speak to what concerns you have for DACA eligible people and what advice you have at the moment.
Well, the concerns, I think we really saw the concerns with this administration. Like I said before, DACA was really meant as a Band-Aid, a temporary solution until we saw the DREAM Act passed. And unfortunately, it's been 8 years and we haven't seen the DREAM Act. And we've seen a lot of instability with the DACA program itself. Now, I think with a Biden administration, I think we'll bring that stability back. But unless we eventually get a DREAM Act passed, folks who are on DACA, it doesn't provide a pathway to citizenship. It doesn't provide really even a legal status even. So while it provides some stability for, DACA recipients do get more stability, there's still a lot of questions and there's a lot of discomfort about, well, what could happen in the future? And we're not going to see those concerns go away until we get a DREAM Act passed.
And to respond to a clarifying question, unfortunately, DACA holders are not eligible for federal financial aid. But as Adriana mentioned, she was able to benefit from merit-based scholarships. And as Sarang also mentioned, in-state tuition is available to DACA holders in Massachusetts. There's one more question for you or me, Sarang. Do DACA recipients have to apply and pay fees yearly?
Yes, they do have to. It's a little weird. The DACA application itself does not actually have a fee, but you do have to pay a fee for the work authorization, and you have to do work authorization, the application for DACA. So it's, and correct me, Jessica, if I'm forgetting, I think it's $495 right now for the application. So yeah, but that's right. It's every 2 years, although the Trump administration is trying to change it to 1 year.
Right. So the application used to be every 2 years. Since under the July memo, now it's a yearly application, or deferred action is granted for a period of 1 year. And the fee, as Sarang said, is $495, We are fortunate enough at MIRA to have support through EOS Foundation to provide assistance with the application fees. And so individuals in Massachusetts who are seeking to currently renew their DACA can request that assistance, both in the application assistance and the financial assistance through our website. I see a question about what can listeners do to stand up for DACA recipients, especially in Massachusetts? Sarang, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Well, I'd say there's a couple of things. One really is just pushing for the DREAM Acts. I think that's one of the most important things we can do right now. Another really is to connect DACA recipients to the kind of resources that they need in order to know, kind of like Adriana was talking about, having to go online to find out if she is eligible for a scholarship, to be able to make that kind of information more readily accessible to folks is really, I think, one of the most helpful things we can do for DACA recipients right now.
And I see a question in there about whether DACA is different from state to state. The answer is no. DACA is a federal program. And so it's the same application process and the same eligibility criteria, no matter where someone lives. But of course, being a Massachusetts-based coalition, we're able to offer assistance and financial assistance to folks right here in Massachusetts. There is one question in here about how Republican control of the Senate may continue to make reforms like the DREAM Act difficult to enact. This is a press question.
So I would say it just makes it possible we'll see a repeat of 2010, where we did get bipartisan support in the House. We got it passed in the House. But when it got to the Senate, it was filibustered. It's entirely possible we could see the same thing come about in 2021.
Okay. And there's also a question about the push for financial aid in state for DACA recipients in the next legislative session. Do you have any insight on that, Sarang?
I would say that's probably a question for Amy.
Who unfortunately is not with us today. I have not heard of any such initiatives this coming session.
But she will be with you all next week. You can ask her then.
I also wanted to mention that MIRA is able to raise funds for merit-based scholarships for DACA recipients. And so, of course, we always appreciate any support to support wonderful students like Adriana. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions right now.
There are no more questions? Okay, well, it sounds like it's about time to wrap things up. Thank you everyone so much for attending, taking the time to listen, and for some really great questions as well. Thank you especially to Adriana for sharing your experience with us today.
It's my pleasure. I'm always very, very thankful to the people that helped me, so I will always contribute my support back.
Great. Well, we were so happy we were able to help you out. As we did mention earlier, this is the first in a 4-part series of events. Hope you'll join us next week for a discussion on how our legislative affairs team works to advocate for the inclusion of immigrants and immigrant issues in state budget allocations. Once again, thanks everyone so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next week. Take care. Okay.